Hi, Michael Buffer here, and you are watching Lights Out.
This is Lights Out. I am Faisal Khan, and this is podcast 30 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast. Delighted to be joined by my usual fellow Lights Out team members, Mr. Asif Khan and Mohsin Gulshir, and delighted once again to be joined all the way from the Good Boxing Podcast, Josh Sayers.
Hello.
Guys, how's it going?
All good, lad.
Glad to have you guys on here as always. Before we get started, let's just remind the viewers out there, if they haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give us a follow on all the social media platforms as well. The links are in the description. And as of now, if you want to listen to this podcast on Spotify or any of the other podcast platforms, check out the links in the description. We are currently on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and many more. And of course, don't forget to follow the Good Boxing Podcast on their Instagram account, and make sure you subscribe to their YouTube channel. Links are in the description. We've got a lot to talk about today, boys. We're going to have to obviously start off with what's ahead of us this Saturday night. Revenge or repeat? The Rumble on the Rock. Dillian Whyte versus Alexander Povetkin 2. It's a huge fight in the heavyweight division. I'm going to ask Asif first, because he's not been with us the last few weeks, so we'll have to see how rusty he actually is. Is this the biggest fight of Dillian Whyte's career on Saturday night?
Yeah, I think every fight of his is probably the biggest fight of his career, because he's always been in that category of, you know, he's nearly there, but he's always at that final stage, isn't he, where he's always taking these risky fights when maybe he didn't need to. The Povetkin fight was definitely one of those fights. You know, he was mandatory, possibly had to wait a bit longer than he'd been waiting. I think it was like, what, a year or 2 years or something ridiculous. And one punch changed his path. So it's a massive fight for him. It has to be revenge. If it's not, then where does he go? He's going to, all that waiting, all that patience will be down the drain, and he'll be back to square one.
You know, when we talk about repeat versus revenge, it reminds me of Hay versus Bellew 2, except this time Hay was going into the fight under a lot of pressure, knowing that a defeat would more or less end his career. Guys, if Dillian Whyte is to lose on Saturday night, is that Dillian Whyte completely finished, or is it just a case of you've got a long way to get back to the top, and potentially even more longer than the previous path?
I'll take this one.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I personally think it is a tremendously big fight for Dillian Whyte. I feel like it is a must win in terms of his career, for sure. If he loses, he's undoubtedly going to go to the back of the line and have to kind of wait and see more or less and fight his way back up. Just unfortunately, and fortunately for him, the heavyweight division does have depth. You know, you have the major players, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, the Deontay Wilders of the world, the Andy Ruizes of the world. But, I mean, Brazil keeps getting shots. So, I mean, Dillian Whyte, I got to say, is still, I mean, think about it. He's really going to still get paydays. He sells tickets because the guy, I know a lot of people don't like him, and he's kind of brash and harsh at times, but as a fighter, he's box office. I mean, even in the Povetkin fight, he's still talking trash after he got knocked out. He's like, oh, I got caught out there. And he always talks himself into another fight. So I think he won't be an elite level. You can't say he's knocking on the door for a title shot anytime soon if he loses. But I can certainly see him still being around to fight that B tier, maybe lower A tier fight, or a gatekeeper kind of fight for like a Ergovich coming up, where he's still going to make a pretty good amount of change, in my opinion, because he's only 32. Like, he still has a lot of fight in him.
Ron, when I ask you of your opinion on Povetkin, you just say he's a tough son of a bitch. Yeah. Does this fight suit Povetkin more on Saturday night, given the fact that the pressure's on Dillian Whyte, and Dillian Whyte has to look good on Saturday night?
I mean, it's going to be an interesting fight. I mean, how's it going to go? Is there going to be a shutout, 12 rounds, he's going to win on points? Or is he going to go for the fancy, go for that, with that equalizer and, get that knockdown? It's going to be, we know what Povetkin brings. He's got power. You know, he's got power in those hands. He's got knockout power, and as he demonstrated that in his last fight. I think Dillian needs to really show something. Otherwise, the parade is going to pass him by. I agree with what Josh and what Asif said. This is his time. There's younger, kind of up-and-coming heavyweights. Hrgovic, he's mentioned. We've got Joyce. You know, they're going to go past him in the pecking order, and that's a massive shame because he's, you know, if we think about who Dillian Whyte fought, you know, leading up to it, and you know, we know about he's been on the mandatory for the world title. He's fought Joseph Parker, Derek Chisora, Oscar Rivas, Lucas Brown. Fights he didn't need to take, but he's taken it, and you know, as boxing fans, we've loved him. But this is one too many fights, Povetkin. But yeah, he was winning that fight, you know, comfortably. He's winning all the rounds.
Yep.
It's just that one nasty left uppercut that caught him.
So that is a worrying thing because you look at it. If you look back to the first fight, he controlled from literally towards the end of when he got knocked out. It was a perfect performance. I said it was probably one of his best performances up until the knockout. So, you know, let's talk tactics. You look back at that fight and you think you hardly did anything wrong. It was just one loss of concentration. So what do you do differently in this second fight to avoid something like that happening again? Because you talk about Povetkin, great amateur pedigree, former world champion, has only lost to Klitschko and Joshua. What do you do differently?
I was going to say, first of all, so with Whyte, he's always there to be hit. You know, any fights you watch of his, he always takes punches. You know, even when he fought Chisora, he rolled the dice on so many occasions in that fight. Even the Povetkin last round as well. Yeah, I mean, even the Povetkin fight. I know you say he controlled the fight, but you always felt he was there to be hit. You know, he has these vulnerable phases throughout fight. So tactics wise, I think he has to take him out early. I can't see it going late because I think it will play on his mind. It will play on his mind that, look, this guy has got that one punch power. And look, 12 rounds is a long time, especially for heavyweights. And there will be a time where his concentration will drop again. And if he gets caught, lights out. You know,
the reason why I say you're 100% right. Every fight you've seen Dillian Whyte in this exciting from start to finish. The Joseph Parker fight, you know, in control. Round 12, he almost lost the fight, but in the end, he does enough to win. The two fights with Derek Chisora, had the second fight not ended the way it did, he'd have probably lost that on points. Oscar Rivas, he got knocked down as well, and he was pretty comfortable in that fight. But at what point do you look at Dillian Whyte? Because let's say he gets through Povetkin, then the Wilders, then perhaps maybe the Furies and the Joshuas. At what point do you expect Dillian Whyte to think something needs to change in terms of making it less of an exciting fight, but more of a controlled and comfortable fight? Because this is Povetkin, and no disrespect to Povetkin, but if Povetkin is able to do that to Dillian Whyte, doesn't that make you think what the likes of Joshua, Fury, and Wilder would do to Dillian Whyte if they got in the ring with him and Dillian Whyte was still as reckless as he is? Because at some point in your career, like Anthony Joshua before Andy Ruiz was knocking out people left, right, and centre. But in the second fight, he knew Ruiz was powerful. He knew he had a lot of pace, and he, you know, adjusted his performance, and he changed, and he just completely outboxed him. So wouldn't that be a smart move to take into Saturday night's fight, to perhaps box a bit smart and beat him cleverly rather than just looking to take him out?
I'd like to take that question. I mean, let's look at Dillian Whyte from that first loss against Anthony Joshua. There's a different, you know, he's come on leaps and bounds from that. You know, he was all out attack, and he's refined his boxing, his skills, and he boxed a lot more intelligently compared to where he was a lot more rash, a lot more gung ho. That's his approach that I had him. But Asif said, you can't, you know, change his kind of heart is, you know, kind of putting all into it. Another interesting thing is he's changed trainer. He's got Lennox Lewis's former trainer. I think it goes by the name of the Shadow. So that's going to be interesting to see how that chemistry plays up. You know, he's been with his previous trainer for, you know, throughout most of his career. So I think that's going to be interesting to see if they've connected, and what happens on that night, and will he identify what went wrong against Povetkin, and why did he kind of switch off, and why does he switch off, and hopefully the shadow can kind of help overcome those kind of flaws.
Josh, you do a lot of tactical insights on your platform. If you're in Dillian Whyte's corner on Saturday night, given what happened in the first fight with how it finished, what tactics do you take into the fight with Povetkin on Saturday night?
Upon rewatching, if you look at the fight, I agreed with you actually in the sense that it was one of his most tactically brilliant fights. He was popping him to the body. He was hitting him with left hooks to the body. He was basically picking whatever shot he wanted to land. And I personally think the rust being on the bench for so long, being that he's a boxer, and Dillian Whyte's actually a pretty underrated boxer in the heavyweight division. I feel like he does have boxing ability. But if you look at the fight with Mariusz Vach, right, clearly you saw Dillian Whyte was out of shape in that fight. He kind of just took it. He was just knocking the cobwebs off. But I feel time off affects your reflexes more than anything. If you're a puncher, that time off probably will bother you in terms of volume, but if you touch your opponent, you're still going to punch hard. I feel like with the reflexes that Dillian Whyte was trying to use against Povetkin, he was doing a good job. I just think he made one mistake. He was moving to his left. He went to go spin when he went to go throw the hook. He was going to roll with it, and that uppercut just slid right under. And he does this. He's still okay. I mean, it was a mistake. Povetkin has been in there with world champions, and that's the one thing you knew Povetkin was going to bring. He's tough, he's formidable, and he has power. I mean, he rocked a lot of the guys he's fought before, and truthfully, I don't see Dillian Whyte losing this fight. Anything could happen. He could just get blown out. I mean, another punch can land and he does get knocked down or knocked out. But personally, if I had to bet or like kind of say what was going to happen, I would say Dillian Whyte's going to win. He boxes brilliantly, and I can see him stopping Povetkin to the body because his body shots were really, really telling. He was hitting Povetkin with shots that you saw him bending over. And I'm not going to sit here and say Povetkin didn't also hit him too. Clearly, he knocked him out. But for the most part, you saw Dillian Whyte in control tactically. And I don't see anything that much he has to change, except for the fact that if you're going to hit him, get out. If you're going to box, if you're going to bang, bang. But whatever you decide to do, just stick with it. I felt like he was trying to knock the rust off and get rounds in and just got caught. That's my opinion.
There's a lot riding on Saturday night. And there's a lot of pressure on as well on Saturday night because you look at Dillian Whyte, some of the performances he's given, some of the fights he's been in, you just don't want to see it go wrong for him on Saturday night. And I'd hate to see him lose. But let's get a prediction. I'm going to predict Dillian Whyte will stop Alexander Povetkin in rounds 4 to 8. Your prediction, please, guys.
Yeah, probably the same. Probably mid-round stoppage, I hope. Fingers crossed. That's what we want as British fans. But yeah, I can see him stopping him. Maybe round 4, round 5.
Ron, Josh, what happens on Saturday night?
Revenge for me. I think he wins on points. I genuinely think he's going to play it safe. And yeah, he's going to use more of his boxing IQ. And hopefully, I agree with what Josh said, kind of not falling for that same kind of mistake that he made. So I see it on points.
Yeah, I have Dillian Whyte. He's going to go out there and he's going to starch him probably around 4 or 5. He's going out there to make a statement and let basically make up for what he did last time. I mean, he had to because he fought in Eddie Hearn's house. They set up that fight for him. That was supposed to be his coming out party, and in his own house, he lost one of his most valuable assets besides Anthony Joshua. So I think he's trying to make it up.
And that's a dig all the way from America, right there. But no, listen, do you know what? It's actually a very good card as well. You've got JJ Metcalf versus Ted Cheeseman, Wardley versus Molina, Congo versus Mickelson. Some really good fights. You've also got the debut of Ricky Hatton's son, Campbell Hatton. So we're looking forward to it on Saturday night. It's going to be a big night of boxing down in Gibraltar, Rumble on the Rock. Right, let's move on and let's talk about last Saturday night's action because Britain has another world champion. Lawrence Okolie joins the likes of David Haye, Carl Thompson, Enzo Macronelli, Johnny Nelson. And Tony Bellew, I don't know if I just said his name. He's now the WBO Cruiserweight Champion of the world. He stopped Kryzstof Glowacki. I believe he's in round 6. Probably his best performance of his career. There was a few things said on the WhatsApp group, though. Start with you, Asif. You don't rate the Cruiserweight division. Fair enough. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But surely we've got to give Okolie some credit. Within 16 fights, British champion, Commonwealth champion, European champion, and now world champion. A lot of people criticised Okolie at the beginning of his career, but look at where he is now. He's now world champion. He's more likely to fight Marius Bradis in what's going to be a unification clash, and he's going to move up to the heavyweight division. Has Eddie Hearn done a very good job in managing Lawrence Okolie, or are you still not fully satisfied?
No, listen, I was very critical of the source. There's a few things I've watched of him, interviews in the past and that, and I don't know, some people you take to, and I didn't, but after watching him win and then listening to his interviews, listening to his story about where he's come from, I've taken to him a bit more. And look, I've got my opinion about that division. I don't think it's the most exciting division. I don't think it's the most competitive division. So yeah, listen, to do what he's done in 16 fights, to be a world champion from where he's come from, massive credit to him. But I don't think we'll see him tested until he moves up to heavyweight, if I'm being honest. I can't see there being any test. I mean, I was looking at the world champions today. One of the world champions is the guy that Tony Bellew beat for the vacant champion.
Magabu.
I mean, it says it all. I mean, to me, it says it all about the division. So I think we'll see him tested when he moves up to heavyweight division, just like we do with all the cruiserweights in the past. Usyk, Bellew, Hay. Yeah, that's my take. I don't get too excited over that division, if I'm being honest.
But isn't Marius Bradis now the perfect test for Lawrence Okolie? He's been around in that division.
He's the only test. I mean, who else is there?
Riyad Kapoor, Billam Smith, Dion Juma, these are brilliant fighters, but they're still at domestic level, but they're not far off from Lawrence Okolie in terms of their record.
But he's at world level now, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And he's gonna need that fight to put him up to the next stage. But then where is the next stage? It's not at cruiserweight, in my opinion. He's a big cruiserweight as it is. He's going to have to step up. I love the thought of him fighting Usyk at heavyweight. I think that makes perfect sense. But maybe Usyk by that time might be on to bigger and better things. But I can only see him being tested when he moves up to the heavyweight and mixes it with the big boys.
Reading a lot on Twitter as of lately, they're lining up a potential fight with Derek Chisora. That would be a very interesting fight to see him start off at heavyweight. Again, obviously Chisora's one of the most experienced fighters in the heavyweight division. It could be a risk because I believe under David Haye, Derek Chisora has been a different fighter. But Josh, what type of a test would Marius Bradis be for Lawrence Okolie? Because you've done a few things on Marius Bradis in your previous podcast. And is that sort of the one fight that Okolie needs that will get the public thinking, yeah, this guy is the real deal? Because there's still a lot of people on social media that are just still not taking to him and giving him the credit that he rightfully deserves.
Mm-hmm. My opinion is this. If the reason why I feel like he should fight Bradis, right, is the only way we could ever set up or promote a fight is how. People often cite common opponents. So as the Azir, the Asif. As Asif said, they're trying to set up, in my opinion, I could see the Usyk and Okolie fight happening, right? So who's the only common opponent if you're trying to set it up? Bradis. Bradis, if you look at it, gave Usyk a hard fight. It was a majority decision loss, pretty close, hard fought. Why not fight him? If he dominates Bradis, you can start saying, oh, this guy beat X better. And then you can say, oh, maybe you put him against Usyk. The reason why I do like that fight with Usyk a lot is when you looked at the Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez fight, right? Papachenko had Loma trying to move to the right. Teofimo shut that right side down. And then you saw that he struggled fighting going the other way, right? Going left. So in my opinion, when Chisora fought Usyk, right, you saw that Chisora was having success, kind of shutting down that angle and adjusting to Usyk. So I think Okolie given the fact that he could actually fight going right and left, can give Usyk tremendous problems because Usyk, as you know, doesn't like it to the body. I mean, no one does, but you clearly saw when Chisora was hitting him to the body, he was affected. I kind of got a little annoyed that Chisora didn't change tactics. He just kept doing the same thing the whole fight. I wish he would have went left a little more than just going the same way with that shift he was trying to throw. But that's why I feel Okolie should definitely move up to heavyweight. If he fights Chisora, what's that going to set up to? A common opponent with Usyk. So if you look at kind of the way they're trying to promote it, I really feel like Eddie Hearn is going to try to make that fight. And I think it makes sense. He's in a catch-22. He stays at cruiserweight. He's going to be the dominant cruiserweight that no one talks about because, like you said, it's not really a deep division. And it's unfortunate because the kid has skills. Like, I love watching him, but eventually you're going to run out of opponents and the guy's going to be similar to other champions that just fight just no name after no name. And then we're like, who did you fight? So you move up, you're fighting bigger guys, and then you potentially set yourself up for a loss, but you're going to get a lot of money because you move up. The heavyweight division pays the best, in my opinion. And it's a no-brainer. Move up, beat this guy Bradis, have that common opponent, move up, fight Chisora, and now you have two common opponents. And then you have the former undisputed versus potentially another undisputed champion and cruiserweight champion. And you just have a fantastic event.
Ron, where do you stand on all of this? I mean, do you think it's right that he cleans up that cruiserweight division, gets past Marius Bradis? Or is it just a case of now where the division, as Asif said, and as most of us would agree, it's not the most exciting division, and just go up to heavyweight, and tackle the likes of the Usyks, the Chisoras, maybe even the Daniel Dubois, the Hughie Furies, and then if you can come past those tests, move up a level and look for the real big names in that division.
I mean, that seems to be where he wants to go. I mean, in the heavyweight division, I think there was talk of him putting Dillian Whyte on his backside in sparring sessions. I don't know how true that was. I remember there was a war of words between the two of them. But I want to take a moment just to say how much he's come on as a fighter. I remember myself and you, that was one of the first boxing events that we went to. Isaac Chamberlain
British Beef.
And
Okolie.
It was a poor fight. It was a terrible fight. And he was slated for his style. It was the whole punch, punch, clinch, punch, punch, clinch. But in that fight, we really got to see him, use his strengths really well, that long reach, those long dangly arms. And I realized that he's too big for the cruiserweight division. So naturally, he's, kind of like one step already in the heavyweight division already. But one thing we've got to bear in mind, he's relatively young in his boxing career. He's only had 16 fights. Now, to put him in with a big shark like Usyk or a Chisora, you're asking for a lot there. I think I would have another fight at cruiserweight, and I agree with the panel with what they said about Bradis. That would be a good matchup. Or someone, if they are going to jump ship and go into the heavyweight division, it's going to be someone at a lower level operator just to kind of feel the weight. Heavyweight boxers, they carry a lot more weight. Obviously, the punches are going to be a lot harder as well, and guys will be a lot bigger. So he's not going to have that much of an advantage that he's had, at cruiserweight. Those long dangly arms. You got people at 6'5" plus. So that, I think you need to factor that in. But I would love to, throw him in the mix, in the future in that heavyweight division, which there's so many exciting names there.
I think you got to give Eddie Hearn a lot of credit, though. He's done very well by him because Okolie has been, a lot of people have slagged him off. When you look back when he fought on one of the
Matt Yaskin. Do you remember that fight?
He got so much abuse for that fight because of the performance and because
it was a terrible fight. That was for the British Cruiser title, and I went to switch the channel off, and I was like, "This isn't boxing. This is, kind of two men hugging each other." And I remember Bellew was shouting, saying, "Just do your thing. Let the punches flow." And in that fight against Glowacki, he did that, and he kept the distance, and he used that jab really well, and that knockout. Wow, It was a simple kind of knockout, but that's him boxing to his strengths. Now, would he be able to boss, heavyweights around like that? Only time will tell.
I think you give a lot of credit to Shane McGuigan as well, because since he's come in, Okolie's improved and he's only going to get better. And Shane McGuigan, he's got a good reputation. You've seen what he's done with Anthony Fowler if you look at his performance the other night. So got to give some credit to Shane McGuigan. And listen, I'd love to see the Braiders fight, but you never know in this sport. Let's move on, because it was announced the other day, I believe a day before the actual card, that on May the 1st, Derek Chisora will take on Jose Parker in another mouth-watering clash in the heavyweight division. Katie Taylor defends her undisputed women's lightweight title against Natasha Jonas. Dimitry Bivol, the Spider, comes to the UK to take on Craig Richards. He defends his world title, but Chris Eubank Jr. also returns on that card, where he takes on Nial Morrison. Asif is a big Eubank Jr. fan. Look, obviously we're limited.
I'm a
Let's
big
keep this PG, Asif. Come on, I know you'll start drooling all over.
We're limited
from America. The guest from America who knows a lot about boxing is going to slate me. Normally, I can get away with these kind of debates with people like the other people we have on the panel, but I think Josh is licking his lips here to absolutely destroy me.
Remember one thing, guys, we're on limited time, but Asif, Josh is going to obviously have to tackle you in terms of why you're a big Eubank fan. But Asif, Eubank's back. We interviewed his opponent, Marcus Morrison, and obviously the link is shared in the description. Make sure you check that out. But listen, we were hearing Kell Brook, we were hearing the Charlos, we were hearing Golovkin, but it's a British fighter with a good record. Watch some of his fights on YouTube. He seems like a very decent fighter, trained up in Liverpool in the Gallagher's boxing gym, which has got a very good reputation. But how happy are you that your man Eubank Jr. is going to be back come May the 1st?
Listen, he had to fight someone, right? So, whoever he fought after this long layoff, he was going to get slated for anyway, because he's built himself up so big. He spoke about the Canelos and the Triple Gs and Billy Joe Saunders. No matter if he didn't fight any of them, he was going to get slated. So look, it's a comeback fight, isn't it? I mean, he hasn't fought for so long. I love him, man, because to me, boxing is about entertainment. I know there's people that like the sweet science behind it, but I love the entertaining fighters. And to me, he's entertaining. He's box office every time. He's never in a dull fight, and he won't be in a dull fight. This fight, I think, this fight is a setup for the Kell Brook fight. I think they were negotiating for this fight, but it didn't happen. So I can see this being just a tick-over fight. I mean, listen, the guy he's fighting isn't a bad fight. I mean, he's only lost 2 or 3 fights. So, I know the last guy he fought, I think, had 49 losses or something. But listen, I think Chris Eubank Jr. is just box office to me. He's never in a dull fight, and it won't be a dull fight as long as it lasts.
The hashtag next gen needs to completely go from his social media pages now. He's not a next generation superstar anymore, Asif. But listen, I agree with you. He's entertaining. He'll throw everything in there, as well as the kitchen sink. But the bottom line is, you just struggle to see where his basic boxing skills are. This is why I'm going to ask Josh Sayers why we got the reaction we did when I mentioned Chris Eubank Jr. So, floor's all yours. Take it away. What is your issue with Chris Eubank Jr.?
Every time he's had to step up, he's fallen short. I mean, when he fought Billy Joe Saunders, you saw what happened. Unfortunately, Billy Joe makes a lot of people look bad. But one thing I'm going to capitulate here is it is his first fight back. Everyone deserves a tune-up. I agree. You're not going to make people happy. You can't go after the elite of the elite right off the bench. I mean, if you haven't fought in a while, you're going to be rusty. And especially with Chris Eubank, he's a very fast twitch, very athletic fighter that likes to use angles and be explosive. You're not going to feel comfortable unless you're in the ring with a couple of guys like that. And truthfully, a guy like Chris Eubank with that confidence, if he builds confidence, he can certainly shock a top fighter. I don't think he's consistent enough to be a top tier like Canelo or any of that kind of level. But Chris Eubank is a talented fighter. Unfortunately, he just has that last name. And he's like Chavez. Unfortunately, you have to live up to a name that you're just never going to be. If you were just comparing him to Chris Eubank Jr., who knows what he could be. But now that he has to actually compare it to his dad, I just think it's impossible.
I don't think it's impossible to be successful, but it is impossible to do what his old man did. That's for sure, especially with his age. He's 31 years old now. This has to be his year. If he's not successful this year, he's never going to be successful. I mean, everyone's got the opinion on the IBO, yeah? He goes around nightclubs with the IBO around his shoulder. I mean, like, for God's sakes. Nobody really looks at it as one of the major prizes in boxing. But look, he is entertaining, and he will fight anybody, and he will literally, give you what you pay for. But the bottom line is his basic boxing skills for me is what lets him down. Ron, is this going to be a new improved Eubank Jr. or is it just going to be the same old, same old? Let's bear in mind he's trained with Roy Jones for longer than 6 months. What do you expect to see?
Yeah, that was just on the tip of my tongue. I would hope so. I mean, he's not had a good history with trainers. I mean, I can't remember his last trainer.
Ronnie Davis.
No. Before there was he had a trainer in between. I forgot his name.
Nate something.
Nate Diaz. No, I'm not.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So that we saw improvements in his last few performances with Chris Eubank Jr. Who better to kind of refine him and his skill set than Chris, than Roy Jones. I hope so. I hope to see some improvement because Josh said, he gets found out by these, top level operators. George Groves and did a number on him. Talked a good fight. Eubank Jr. But unfortunately, he didn't deliver. Same with. I think the problem with Eubank Jr. He starts very slow, and he's so far behind on points, and he kind of leaves himself really vulnerable to shots. But credit to him, he's got a good chin on him. He's never been dropped, but he does give as good as he gets as well. He's got those vicious body punches. He's got a good engine on him. So hopefully that his new team per se, and when I say new team, hopefully his dad's not there acting like a distraction and posing in the corner and doing all that.
That's what makes him exciting.
It does. But I think, I guess it deflects it from him. It takes the pressure away from him.
Well, it's a shame that we're not going to hear the Warriors code anymore. But listen, I want him to be successful because I like watching him, but it's just basic boxing skills. And he's got to drop this ego where he doesn't listen to the advice in his corner because he's got the potential to be a great fighter. And Asif's always said one thing: if he fought someone like Canelo, he's probably the one fighter that would turn up and look to knock Canelo out. And I would love to see that. But at the same time, you want to see him beat the other fighters that he's got to beat to get towards Canelo. But anyway, listen, May 1st, we'll see what the new Chris Eubank Jr. has got. And of course, there's also other good fights on that card. Bivol defends his world title against Craig Richards. That's a big fight for Craig Richards. Bivol is an absolute machine. And hopefully, if Bivol does come through it, we might set up that fight with Artur Beterbiev, a great unification fight in the light heavyweight division. But Craig Richards, another British fighter, we're rooting for him. Fingers crossed he puts in a good performance and can become world champion. And of course, Katie Taylor defends her undisputed lightweight title against Natasha Jonas. But we'll have to talk about the main event before we round up the podcast. Del Boy, War, whatever you want to call him, still keeps on getting these big box office fights. I think it's 10 losses on his career, yet he's still known as the gatekeeper. I mean, the guy sells. It's another great fight to look forward to, but it's surely now has got to be the time where if he does lose, that might just be game over. Where do you guys stand on this fight with Joseph Parker on May 1st?
The first question I've got to ask: what does Joseph Parker get out of this? I mean,
well, if he wins, he gets more towards the world title shot. Ron. I mean, come on.
But you could be fighting someone who's higher up the rankings. No disrespect to Chisora, but I think it's more of a payday for him. He had a warm-up fight. Not a warm-up fight, but he had a close, contentious decision that he fought in New Zealand. I forgot his name.
Junior Farr.
Yeah, Junior Farr. Yeah. Okay. It's going to be an exciting fight. We know what he brings. He brings drama. I love his kind of press conferences, the ones with he glassed me. And he fights with his heart. Against Dillian Whyte, that could have gone either way. So there's still fighting the dog left.
Asif, Josh, Is this last chance saloon for Del Boy come May the 1st?
We've been saying that for the last 10 years, I think, about Derek Chisora. You know,
10
he
losses,
keeps landing
man.
these fights. You know, I don't know how, but he is in it. He's entertaining. He's hardly in a dull fight. I mean, there's been a few where he's been. I remember that one he had in, I think it was Paris or something, or Monaco.
Monaco, Caballel.
Terrible
And the
fight.
one
But
against
other than
Tyson Fury as well, the second fight.
yeah. But other than that, recently under management of David Hay and that, he seems to have this newfound belief. Again, he's entertaining, but Joseph Parker, he's a spoiler for me, isn't he? I mean, he spoils fights. I mean, that Junior Farr fight was terrible. He's lucky to have got the win. Again, the card, I mean, it's a good card. Is it a pay-per-view card? I don't know. I'm not going to be paying for it. That's all I know. But
card of the year right there, guys.
Yeah. I mean, Mosley makes a great point. What do they get out of it? I mean, where do they go from winning that? It doesn't take them up another step, in my opinion. It just keeps them at that level. You know, if Parker wins, they say, oh, he just beat Chisora. You know, if Chisora wins, oh, he's only just beat Parker. So yeah, it'll be a good fight, but we'll see what happens.
Josh, quickly sum it up for us before we end the podcast.
I think Joseph Parker, I hate saying this, but he just wins. I mean, he has a win over Andy Ruiz, questionable, sure. The Junior Farr fight was ugly.
The Huey Fury fight was questionable as well, in my opinion.
The Huey Fury fight was questionable, but for some odd reason, he ends up just convincing the judges to win the fight. I see him beating Chisora. It's going to be close because Chisora is going to come and give a good account of himself. I don't think he's going to win. But to answer your question about Chisora, he's going to fight Okolie, so he's good.
Yeah, he's
going to be fine. He loses, he wins. He's going to get another fight. That guy's going to be around for a while.
Plus, Andy Lee's training Parker now as well, so I think that might. I mean, Andy Lee part of the Fury team, so you never know. We might see a new Joseph Parker.
And I think it was only right because this fight is rescheduled because they were meant to fight on the Taylor Pro Grade undercard, and then obviously a few weeks before Parker gets injured. But look, it's a good fight. I like the card. We're going to have to do a debate on another day whether it's pay-per-view worthy. Can't complain. 2 world title fights. You know, a good fight in the heavyweight division. And Eubank Junior returns as well. Asif, Ron, thank you very much for your time. Josh as well, a pleasure having you on. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Check us out on the social media platforms. If you want to listen to this podcast on any of the podcast platforms, links are in the description. Make sure you subscribe to The Good Boxing Podcast and follow them on Instagram. That's what we've got time for on podcast number 30 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast. Guys, pleasure once again. And thank you for listening to the Lights Out Boxing Podcast.